And they all rode away on Jagan's horse. In fact, I think some of the horses may be cloaked as well. Also, everything's on fire, but we're probably not going to see that in-game. See, I told you, nothing's burning anymore. Also, bleeding half to death hurt my pride as well, but we're going to ignore that. Oh yeah, that was the thing you were supposed to do. Why were we doing that on the way over here? And also, why are we just standing here now? And unsurprisingly, Marth's dad is dead now. Also unsurprisingly, they actually took Falchion, the only weapon powerful enough to take down their leader, so that was actually a pretty smart move on their part, curse their souls. His last words were, "Arg," and I think some gurgling after that? Now he must be great. Not mediocre, not even fantastic, just great. Let me punch him, sir. I'm gonna punch him real good. I'm gonna punch all those Grog guys. Gonna punch him so hard. Gonna punch him up real good. Don't worry, Kane. I also want to punch up all the Grog guys. And it's just gonna be you and me one day. Just you and me in a revenge plot, and you're gonna be my co-op buddy, Kane. See, look. There's a house right there. You should go to it. Perhaps we should talk to them before we leave them to die. Anyway, before we start the chapter proper, let's have a look at our new characters. So first off, we have yet another Cavalier. This time we get Kane. Now, Kane's a little bit better than Abel, but not quite as good as Frey. With one exception, of course, and that's his luck growth rate. His luck growth rate is so high it's one of the best in the game, and in fact I believe it's actually one of the best luck growth rates in the series in general, so yeah, if you want someone with high luck, well, Kane's your man. We also get Jagan, who, while not a Cavalier, he's actually a promoted Cavalier, which is a Paladin. Now, Jagan looks really good at first, but unfortunately for him, the fact that he doesn't get to be a Cavalier first kind of limits his stats, and his growth rates in general really aren't that good. And there's a reason for this, but we'll get to it in a bit, but just FYI, you're not really going to want to use Jagan all that much, because while he may be a powerhouse now, he's really not going to be that useful later in the game. And since I don't really want to be using Jagan in combat that much, let's send him down to this house. Now, this guy's actually got some pretty useful advice. Now, certain enemies are aggressive and will just rush you on their own, but if they stand still until you come into their range, you can actually bait them out. Generally, you're going to want either a quick or very defensive character to do this. That way, the enemy, once you're in their range, will come after you, which is very helpful because, first off, of course, it gets them away from other units. Now, we could have Kane here just, come in here and rush everyone, but, then he'd be open to a whole lot of attacks, and he might not be killed, but he'd be fairly injured, more than likely. So it's just a useful way to take on enemies slowly without, having them do too much damage to you. Second off, it also keeps the units together. Say you have some slow-moving units, they will be able to catch up and actually do some damage without being left behind and left out of some experience. Yeah! About that. Well, we should clear these guys out anyway, but I don't think he's gonna like the news. Anyway, the enemy's going to have their turn, and I don't think they're going to talk about mages just yet, so why don't we just quickly talk about terrain? Now, we've been dealing with some fairly standard terrain, just grasslands and floor tiles and all that, but there are different types of terrain that can either help or hinder you, or both, really. We've also seen pillars, I believe, in the castle. We might not have really used them that much, but those actually provide us some extra cover. They allow us some extra evasion, which is always nice. Technically, those gold squares count, you know, the throne squares or stuff like that. There's also forests, which are very prominent in the game. They also raise your evasion. However, you do have to be careful of forests because they impede your movement. And this is actually worse for Cavaliers. Cavaliers take a huge hit to movement whenever they're in a forest, so always be careful. This is also true for mountains, which are similar except they take an even higher toll on your movement, but of course they also provide you a lot of evasion. So yes, you're going to want to definitely keep terrain in mind, especially when you have Cavaliers. In fact, I don't even think they can go over most mountains. And there's also fortress spaces, which are very useful. They're pretty similar to the throne spaces in that they will actually heal you when you're on top of them, as well as providing some extra defense and evasion, so always make sure you're on top of fortresses so you can take their full benefit, and try not to hang out in front of fortresses because the enemies will definitely take advantage of that if you do. You know, they'll go to the fortress themselves and then you'll be at a disadvantage. Of course, fortresses do have one more use for the enemy, but I don't think we'll get into that just yet, because I'm pretty sure we'll see it in the next prologue chapter. And what do you know, that was actually a decent level up for Abel, which kinda sucks because I'm probably not going to use him in the long run. I usually stick to Cain, to be completely honest, because I do like Cain. He's overall fairly good. Jagen's just standing here holding back tears, just whispering himself, "I want to be useful, I want to be useful." Well, I believe we're actually going to introduce mages in a turn, so I don't really want to get into what I want to talk about with Jagen. Oh, no, apparently not. Well, I think when we cross the bridge, Marth will be like, "Hey, there are mages over there, we should be careful of them." So we'll talk about them before the game even brings it up. I know, I'm just spoiling so much right now. But mages are actually fairly dangerous units, especially in this game. They're kind of like archers in that they can attack from a distance, but the thing is, they can also attack up close, so they don't have the same disadvantage of, oh, if you get in close, then they won't be able to do anything about you. You can't just surround a mage and then they'll be sitting ducks. No, they will actually kick your ass, especially in this game, where pretty much every unit has, like, no resistance whatsoever. I mean, you've looked at that, right? You've been paying attention. Barely any physical units have any sort of resistance or resistance growth rates. Marth has one of the better ones, and his is still pretty bad, so in this game, mages can be dangerous just because of that. They also generally don't have very high magic growth rates because of that, because they can still do a lot of damage even without that high magic growth rates. But yeah, you want to be careful of them, though. You don't have to be that careful in all, because, of course, they also have low defense, and they're kinda similar to defenses most characters are with resistance. They don't get that much defense. Yeah, see? Look at those guys. They're mages. Yes, Marth, we know. Keep our wits about us as we fight those mages, otherwise they might hurt us. Because, they're a bit dangerous now since we don't have a healer, so thankfully there are only two, and one of them counts as a boss. Unfortunately, we're also taking a few hits, which I don't want, but these guys are being aggressive, so we can use that to our advantage. Anyway, since we've got a bit of time, I also want to talk about archetypes, which is what I wanted to talk about when, describing Jagen and all that. Fire Emblem has some archetypes in each game, which basically means certain classes have sort of recurring themes about them, both in terms of characters and stat growths. Cain and Abel are both archetypes in themselves. One, of course, is the level-headed knight, and the other one is either hot-headed or very, very laid-back. In Cain's case, he is very hot-headed, while Abel is apparently the calm one. You can't really tell because they don't get that much dialogue, but that's how it is. They also have their own set of stats, and generally I prefer the Cain archetype, I think, though from time to time I go for the Abel one, but usually, yeah, it's Cain. In fact, I think in Fire Emblem 7 they switched the color of knights and their personalities, so Sane is actually, well, it might seem like a bit of a differentiation, I actually do prefer to use Sane in that game, but anyway, we also have the Jagan archetype, which refers to a pre-promoted unit that appears early on and has some very good stats early on in the game, but their growth rates generally mean that they aren't very good characters overall. And yeah, it's not like Jagan is the worst, he's just the first to have that archetype, so don't worry. Jagan's not that terrible. There are worse Jagans in the series, but unfortunately, yeah, he's not that good overall. And just a note, there is a subtype to the Jagan archetype, which I believe is the Oife archetype, as the fandom calls it, which basically is the same thing, except they're actually useful. So characters like Seth from Sacred Stones or Frederick from Fire Emblem Awakening, they're examples of that because they're actually useful paladins. And in the case of Frederick, he's not that amazing overall, I think. I do think you need a bit more effort to make him that worthwhile, but still, he won't be left that far behind. So yes, generally I don't like using the pre-promoted units unless, you know, they're like Seth because Seth is the man, and Frederick because, hey, Awakening lets you use everyone, and I like that. Imagine that, actually giving, you know, some sort of reason to use multiple characters rather than just doing the Thracia method and saying, ha ha ha, we're going to give you a dumb stamina meter so you have to switch out even though you don't really want to. No, incentivize it, make it actually fun to use multiple characters. And speaking of using multiple characters, I am pretty much going to stick to a team overall. Unfortunately, since this game is fairly linear and there are only so many chapters, I do want to stick to a team, just so you know, I don't underlevel anyone, because that would be fairly annoying. Kane is going to be one of my permanent members, and, well, Marth kinda has to be. I mean, he is Marth after all. You can't not have him be the main character. That's just not possible at all. And with this, we're finished. The screen just shifts up like 3 squares and there are paladins everywhere. You do realize there is nowhere safe, right, Marth? I like how Marth doesn't even respond there, he's just like, nope, going back. In fairness, I don't really understand why she decided to stay in the first place. I mean, those guys are already after us, it's not like she bought us any time. There really wasn't any reason for it. Besides, these guys aren't even that tough. In fact, I bet she could beat him, and she's a healer for crying out loud. She could just hit him with a stick for crying out loud. Just do it, they'll go down easy. Okay, so Marth, just bottle up all your anger and rage and hatred, and then later we'll unleash it and I guess kill everyone in Grondolar. Hey 14-year-old, your entire family is dead, so here's the weight of the world on your shoulders, I'd hope you don't mind. And then Fire Emblem Awakening happened, and oh whoops, I guess women can use the falchion.